The reason why Satan wants you to be isolated or wants you to be lonely, and this is something that we need to understand. One of Satan's number one reason is that he wants you to live in ignorance. He wants you to live in fear. He wants you to be anxious. All these kind of things that the enemy wants for your life. But hear this. He wants you to be isolated. And no wonder why we see what happened during the pandemic, where we were told to remain in our homes, not go back to a place of worship or fellowship. That's because the enemy, he knows that if you're alone, if you're isolated, then it can lead you to what? Depression. Loneliness leads people to be what? Depression, mean fear, suicidal, all this kind of thing. We see these are some mental health crises that's happening. So Satan, he desires that you be what? Alone. He knows that when you are alone, you become vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, you are inclined to be what? You feel like you are giving up. You feel like you're falling into a dark pit, a place of depression, a place of where the spirit of heaviness that's a breeding ground for the spirit of heaviness, for depression, for despair, for sorrow, hopelessness. But do not give the enemy an opportunity in your life. Jesus said to Peter, Satan desired to sift you like wheat. Then what else happened after we see this desire on Peter's life? In other words, Satan made a bidding for Peter's life. And notice how did he accomplish this with Simon Peter? What did he do? Notice Simon Peter was isolated. He was not with his other brethren. Where were the other disciples? Peter was alone, and this is why Peter became fearful. So when Peter was asked, were you with Jesus? He started to deny this because guess what? He was alone. He was fearful. And he started to deny Jesus. He started to sense fear because he was alone. And so he caved in. So this is Satan's desire for you to cave in when you're alone. When you're alone, you feel like you are the only person in this world going through this. And so then many persons, this is how they become suicidal. This is how they start to struggle with grief. This is how they start to struggle with crying and mourning and helplessness. But what we're saying is that in order to conquer fear, the enemy tactics to isolate you, you got to make sure that you are fellowshipping with the brethren, your brothers and your sisters. You got to make sure that you surround yourself with people of faith. Peter started swearing, started cursing. I'm sure that if the other disciples were there, Peter perhaps would have said, no, because they would have said, no, we're here for each other. So this is it. So you got to allow your brothers or sisters, they would pray you through, intercede, and they're there to pull you out, right? To distract your thoughts from the devil's words. The devil is speaking lies. The devil is speaking fear. But then your brothers and sisters who you are fellowshipping with, they need to speak what? They would have been speaking faith. They would have been speaking hope. They would have spoken the truth. And so get into a Christian community where you can support, where there is a great level of support and encouragement. And this should be done weekly. This is it. This is it. So this is why the enemy wants to keep you isolated. Hear what the scripture says. We're talking about this. Hear what the scripture says. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. Not giving up meeting together. That's the assembling of the brethren, the church, the ecclesia. As some are in the habit of doing. Many are no longer fellowshipping with the brethren. They're just doing church virtually. But encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day of the Lord approaching. So in other words, the Bible is saying that don't neglect meeting together. Don't neglect your fellowship, especially as you see Jesus is drawing near. So this is why the enemy will want to isolate you. We're going to talk about this. These are conversations we need to have. Listen, Elijah just won such a huge battle when he repaired the altar, right? And fire, he was able to call down fire from heaven. That was some huge victory that he just celebrated. But then the Bible said, guess what? He went on a long journey. He was exhausted. And he was alone. That's it. When you win all these battles and celebrate your victory, get around with brothers and sisters. So he went on a long journey by himself. He was alone. He was lonely, but not just lonely, but he was what? Vulnerable. He was exposed. And then he started to what? Have a pity party. He started to say, oh, it's me alone. It's me alone, my God. This is it. It's me alone. And he started to feel lonely, depressed. See it? 1 Kings 19:4, it says, and Elijah himself, he himself, the Bible is doing this, he himself is the same thing for emphasis, to show that he was alone. This is why the enemy wants to isolate you and keep you in your homes. He alone went on a day's journey into the wilderness. Oh my God. He just celebrated victory. He just exposed and caused the false prophets to be killed and called on fire. That is some huge victory right there. He celebrated. Then guess what? Because he was now vulnerable, because he was now isolated, he was lonely. He was feeling what? Exhausted. He was feeling weak. He was in despair. He was anxious. He was scared. This is just such a now word. Listen to what he did. He came, he sat under a what? Juniper tree. That's loneliness, that's isolation. And he requested for himself that he might die. You see, he became suicidal. This is what we're saying, people of God. If you're feeling like this, get around believers. You got to plug yourself in an intercessory group. It could be a small group. Okay, you could say, okay, my church has not resumed. My church is not open. Plug yourself in to what we call small groups, intercessory group. In fact, we have a prayer line that you can get connected to. I'm going to release the number even at the end of this broadcast. This is it. So Elijah said, I want to die. He was in a pit of despair. I want to die. And he said, it is enough now, O Lord, take my life. He was begging for death. For now I'm not better than my fathers. Pity party. He became emotional. He started to just look at himself to say, okay, it's me alone. And he started to say, Lord, it's me alone. There's nobody else. That's how you feel when you stop going to church, because the enemy wants you to become vulnerable. So now you are now susceptible to what? Fear. He started to fear that Jezebel sent one message, and he started to become afraid of this one woman. So you see, fear started to set in. So when you're alone, you become fearful. You think that there's nobody else, there's no protection. But I want to say to you, get back in the house of the Lord. The house of the Lord is a place where His presence dwells. The house of the Lord is where you are in a community and fellowship with other believers. That's where your protection is. That's where your protection is. David said it like this. He said, blessed are those who are in the house of the Lord. They will ever be praising Him. They will ever be praising Him. Blessed are those who dwell in the house of the Lord, because they will be full of praise. That's it. They go from strength to strength. So strength is in numbers, is in unity. So that's Psalms 84:4, and now I'm reading 7. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them in Zion appear before God. You go from strength to strength when you are with the believers. And I'm talking about the believing believers, those who are full of faith. For David said, for a day in the courts is better than 1,000. I rather to be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wicked. So the Lord is saying, you are blessed when you're in the house of the Lord. David said, one thing I desire of the Lord, and that will I seek after, to seek His face, and that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life, and you shall dwell in the house of... So there it is, people of God. Dwell in the house of the Lord. And finally, listen to what Proverbs 27:17 says. Proverbs, this is what it says, speaking about the coming together of the brethren. It says what? Iron sharpens iron. Oh my God, I love this. Iron sharpens iron. So a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. This is talking about the believers. So believers, we sharpen the countenance of each other by praising, by celebrating. We come into the spirit of unity. And Jesus said, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Jesus said, where two of you are gathered, I dwell there. My presence is there. I am in the midst of you to want to bless you, to keep you. So I want to say to you, get back in fellowship with the saints, because the devil wants to isolate you so that he can get you in a place of vulnerability, where you become so vulnerable. That's it. So the devil, that's where he wants to get you, into that place where you are turned in, just like we saw the example with Elijah and Peter. That's how the enemy was able to move in on them. But when you are with the fellowship of the saints, there is protection. There is protection. God bless you.
If you're looking for an inspiring, Holy Ghost-filled church service, then join our Sunday morning worship service. Our first service starts at 9 a.m. on the Prophetic conference line. Dial 647-484-0401 if you are in Canada. In the U.S., dial 401-283-2000. Access code 647-484-0401. Our second service starts at 10:45 a.m. in the sanctuary located at 5915 Atlantic Drive, Unit Number 3, Mississauga, Ontario. Also streaming on Facebook Live under the No Limits Ministries International CA page is our second service. And if you're looking for a church home, make No Limits Ministries your home. We welcome you. For more information, visit our website www.nolimitsministries.ca.